And she's still looking at her chart, so the questions must be in. If you would please start, Tony, with your introduction and opening statement, and we will progress right along.
All right, so my name is Tony Dastra. I'm the 21-year-old independent candidate running for mayor of Lancaster. I run on the platform, I call it the set of responsibilities, which is sustainability, equality, and transparency. Of the candidates up here tonight, I'm the only one who's a lifelong resident of Lancaster City, so by consequence I've also lived in the city the longest, which is kind of strange being the youngest. But in addition to that, I'm the only one who has some degree of fluency in Spanish, and I've graduated from McCaskey in 2014. I will be graduating from Arizona State University this December with a degree, Bachelor's of Science in Political Science, a business minor, and an organizational leadership minor. I attend the city council meetings very, very frequently. In fact, I have a project where I live stream city council meetings as well as school board meetings. It's called See Through City. If you're interested, you can follow that page on Facebook. That's SEE-THRU City. And then lastly, to close this out, I'm live streaming this debate myself from my phone over there. So if you follow my page, Tony Dastra for Mayor, you can see that video later, or if you want to now, you can share that with your friends so they can also participate. Thank you very much for having me tonight. I appreciate you all, and Zach.
That's nice and informal. Well, I'm Zach Nesbitt. I am one of the other independents running for mayor. I'm 31 years old. I've been a city resident for, 10 years now. Moved from the southern end of the county. And I think one of the things that's, just because what's unique about me, currently I'm the only tenant that is running for mayor. So I identify with about 58% of the city in that regard. And I think that's one of the things that's really crucial to me is housing issues, rent issues, things like that. And equitable economic development, I think, is absolutely essential as we move forward. So those are the things that sort of stand out to me. As far as my background goes, I've been the co-chair of the Lancaster Pride Festival. I'm working in LGBTQ advocacy for about 6 years for a nonprofit. So that's one of the things that I do on the side, just for fun. And Lancaster City now hosts the third largest Pride Festival in the state. We've grown substantially, and I think that's due to the whole environment of the city and just the general inclusivity that we have. One of the things that's given me a nice handle on is the importance of diversity. The LGBTQ community encompasses every single racial, ethnic, economic group out there. So one of the things that I've focused on with that is improving accessibility at our festival. We moved from Buchanan Park to Binns Park, my request, so that way we could have better handicap accessibility. We've added ASL interpretation to main events, so we can focus on reaching out to those other communities that may feel shut out from that. So I think that's one of the other things that I'm very passionate about, and I think that I can bring that to city government in a strong way. That's the basics.
Okay. Thank you. Keep this going. So my name is Janine Sirachi. I'm the Democratic candidate running for mayor. Keeping with the age, I'm 45. I'm a proud parent of an 11-year-old who just started at Reynolds Middle School. So far, so good. And I am currently on City Council. I chair the Finance Committee and serve on Public Works and Economic Development as well, and have a master's degree in public policy. So I really geek out on this stuff. But more, I want to just share with you that my vision for the city, which is a city of shared success. We've seen a lot of advancement in our downtown, and I'm very committed to making sure that that success extends into our neighborhoods. And so I have some ideas that I look forward to sharing with you more tonight. In addition, I am very committed to making sure that part of that shared success is increasing the wages of city residents. We have an unemployment rate that is north of 10% in contrast to our county, which is about 4%. We have seen stagnant wages. We know that as a percentage that families in Lancaster City spend more for their housing, more than 30% of their income on housing. And these are some of the things that I seek to address in partnership with our business community, who is struggling to find employees who are skilled and ready to work. And so workforce development and how we move the needle on poverty in the city is a major focus of mine. And last but not least, I want the city to continue to lead by example. We were the first, one of the first cities to provide same-sex benefits. We were one of the first to, with the NAACP, ban the box. We provide a living wage. Everyone who works at the city makes a minimum of $15 an hour. I want us to be the leader in diversity and hiring. I want the city staff to fully reflect the diversity of the city, and we're not there yet, and we have work to do. So that is a little bit about my vision, a little bit about some of the priorities. I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight, and I thank the League and Brightside and our hosts here this evening, and for all of you for coming tonight. Thank you.
Cindy?
So I would echo the thanks for all of you to be here this evening. I thought I'd start my opening with really talking a bit about my background and my experience. So for more than 35 years, I really have dedicated myself to serving women, children, and families in both here in Lancaster and my last position where we cover 24 counties of central Pennsylvania. Having been actively involved in organizations that I've had the opportunity to lead, I believe that my real expertise comes in the ability to create change. I've really advocated at all levels of government. I've promoted increased access to community-based programs. I really focused on reduced regulations, cost-effective implementation of programs, collaborative partnerships. I feel very strongly about decision-making that is based on data. And I really do have a pretty stubborn resistance to policy that creates barriers for others. That has really been my lifelong work, but I think my greatest strength is in my ability to facilitate groups of people, to bring them together to really figure out how we can solve problems. And you do that through a combination of not only intellect, great compassion for what people are experiencing, I think integrity, and since I'm a lifelong Lancaster County resident, I can't neglect my pragmatism. I think my goal has always been to work with others to find solutions, not to discover solutions and pass them down to folks. When I was given the opportunity to run for mayor, one of the things that excited me was a couple of things. I do want to elevate the whole issue of public health in our city. That would include childhood obesity, health disparities, environmental safety, and opioid abuse. A lot falls into that. I want to focus on safety through a renewed commitment to adequately staffing our police and fire departments. I believe very strongly that our neighborhoods need more of a voice, and I want to utilize any experience I have to be able to leverage funding partnerships. And I will tell you, one of the things that has been so exciting in this pursuit is the number of people, and I see some of you in this audience, who are already doing tremendous work and doing it for no other selfless reason than they love their city and their neighborhood. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to having a chance to explore some of these issues more this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Britt, you get to ask the first question, and we're going to begin with Mr. Nesbitt.
So, my first question is, if elected, what approaches would you take to strengthen relations between the community and law enforcement so that a trusting relationship is not only built, but more importantly, maintained?
Well, I mean, I know this is one of the key topics during the primary season, which I pay very close attention to. And it's something I've experienced while I worked with the Lancaster City Alliance as well. One of the things that we would do, we worked very closely with the police, we worked very closely with the community. And that was one of the comments that we got a lot from the various neighborhoods, was that our city police were not as engaged, that they would arrive when it was all negative interaction, when something negative had happened. And I think that's something we can strive to do better at. For a number of years, I also worked at Lancaster Central Market, and the police officers downtown are very much engaged, those on bicycles, things like that, on horse. They're very, very approachable. And I think that if we can expand that to the neighborhoods, I think we can really foster better relationships between communities and the police, where they get to actually know the first name of an officer, where they can laugh and joke and actually have a good interaction. I think, the big impediment there is funding, obviously, to make sure that we have sufficient forces available so that we can have community policing there. But I think if we can get designated officers for different neighborhoods, we'll definitely go a lot further.
So this is a question where we're having a conversation where we're talking about balancing resources, but that's secondary, I think, to the spirit of this question, which is how can we foster the kind of community connection and engagement between residents and our police such that people feel that when they call the police, not only are they going to get professionalism and responsiveness, but that they feel that the police are there to have their back, and that it's not always an exchange that feels inequitable or that there's a power balance there. And so I think that we have this unique opportunity with the hiring of a new chief of police to really have a community conversation about the qualities that we want to see reflected from the top down. And so part of the what I'm interested in as mayor is making sure that we are leading that process with community engagement, where there are key stakeholders that are involved in that process, and that we can continue to have that conversation. I'm pleased that we're doing more things like Coffee with a Cop. There's going to be 2 more of those events coming up. I know that we have to continue with our cadet program so that we're continuing to recruit city residents into the police department, that we need to continue the Police Citizen Engagement Academy that's happening now, and that we need to continue. So all of these things we have to double down on, as well as be mindful of the resources that we can bring to bear. So I think that we can do both of those things, that they're not mutually exclusive, and that our police are really interested, as much as we are, in continuing to move that conversation forward.
This truly is, at its core, a resource question, and so I don't want to kind of fluff over the fact that there is going to need to be a hard prioritization of how we can get the money to resource our police department effectively, but I do think there are some things that we can do. I want to emphasize training. I think that in organizations that I've led in the past, when you really want to start to change something culturally, you have to begin with making sure that your folks have the right tools. And our police department has been committed to training, but I'm not sure that what they've been committed to has been totally transparent to the people that they are charged to protect, that they take an oath to protect. And so I think we need to get a little more involvement there. A couple of things I'd like to do immediately. I mean, I would like to have a greater out-of-the-cruiser engagement. When I did my ride-along with the police, I really, and again, I'll recognize they had a civilian on board, but we did spend the entire 6 hours riding in a cruiser. And I felt there were opportunities where you could see kids playing basketball, or you could see a group gathered on a front porch that we could have literally stopped and done a quick hello. I also think we need to have greater diversity within the department. I'd like to see us emphasize the Police Athletic League and have some requirements that all police participate in that. Also, for me, I think there needs to be effective and policy around incidents, the debriefing of those, how we can make sure that there is a greater transparency around our police department, and emphasize that community engagement that goes to a greater level than just when the phone rings.
So it was mentioned that the next mayor is going to select a new chief of police, and that's going to be something of importance for me. I want the next chief of police to really be a model for what the force should be. I want them to be fluent in Spanish, and I also want them to be with me in terms of working with the opioid crisis, not condemning those who use drugs. We're worried about people and their addiction, not the fact that they have a drug on their body at that time. But in any case, Spanish is going to be very important for the force in the future, because if we're trying to foster community connections, especially with the city being 40% Latino, we need to make sure that community policing is something we do more actively, and that those officers are able to communicate with the residents directly, not through a third party. We want more people to be able to communicate with their officers directly. And then going into that, we need to make sure that every resident of the city feels comfortable calling the police. I'm the only one up here who said that they support making Lancaster a sanctuary city. I think very strongly that we need to not be concerned with this defunding prospect, because I'm convinced that they're not going to do it. It's just a lot of talk. But even if they do it, we have to stand strong and stand as a community, as a family, against unjust laws that persecute minorities in the city, and know that we are taking care of our residents in the best way we can.
Okay, thank you. Claudia?
It's no secret that Lancaster County residents who visit the city of Lancaster often feel unsafe, and there are some who do not come into the city at all. There are families living and raising children in the city who feel the same fear, worry about crime and public safety. If elected as mayor, how would you improve public safety in the city?
Okay, did everybody hear that question? Okay, so, okay, Janine?
Yeah, so I appreciate this question so much, because there's so much perception about crime and public safety in our city, and I just want to be clear that when we look at violent crime, the city has been maintained relatively steady or has declined. Vehicle thefts are down, homicides have remained relatively stable, burglaries are down. However, perception is reality, and so when people tell me, who live in the county, who are afraid to come downtown, I mean, people used to tell me, Janine, I can't believe you moved into the city. I mean, are you kidding me? I love the city. This is my home. And so there is always going to be perception, and then there's going to be reality, right? And so for the families, and honestly, I'm a little less concerned about people who live out in the county who have that fear, because it's just going to take time for them to experience the city. What I'm more concerned about are the residents who have concerns about crime. And so one of the things that I'm interested in advancing is hiring a director of neighborhood engagement. And that person is going to bring the full complement of city resources across all of the departments to our neighborhoods. And that person is going to be responsible for coordinating and making sure that residents' concerns are heard and responded to across departments. So one of the things that happens now is that we'll have a community meeting, and there'll be an officer or two that will be at that meeting. But those neighbors are talking about other things related to crime and safety as well, that things that can be addressed. So block by block, like the 600 block of St. Joseph Street, they're working on making sure that every porch has a light. These are things that our police are not necessarily able to do, but as a community response, we will be able to do. And that's happening through the SOE partnership, and that's the kind of engagement that we need to continue to have block by block throughout the city. And so where there are neighbors who are concerned about public safety, we're gonna sit down and have a conversation about all the things that we can be doing to bring the full complement of city resources to that question.
Okay. Cindy?
Well, actually, I have to applaud Deneen. That's a great idea. One I had put forward, I think, a couple weeks ago, about having a position. I'm committed to having a position, a neighborhood advocate. And what I perceive for them is not only working around ideas the neighborhood can get engaged, but also having a voice across departments about how we can relate to those neighborhoods and solve problems on their behalf. And I think one of those is clearly perception. So for me, as your mayor, it is trying to not only, of course, elevate First Friday, but I believe I am the only candidate who has been participating in the Latino Second Friday, which has been an effort to try and get some attention to the Southeast by utilizing the arts. It's small. I go and I see people who are feeling like, does anybody in this city notice that in the Southeast we are trying to do these types of initiatives? And I try and definitely encourage them. Every great initiative that I've been involved in just usually start with just a small idea that a group of very impassioned and dedicated people have. Even First Friday in the downtown got started that way. So it's important to me to start breaking down that perception, to have people understand how beautiful Ann Street is, to see the homes that are in the southwest part of our city, to when I talk to someone at the Chestnut Hill Coffee Shop that says, oh, you know, I think this is the only safe neighborhood to walk. Apart from lighting and sidewalks and some other things that may make neighborhoods in the southern part of our city feel more dangerous, I have found the people to be lovely, welcoming, and we can together break down the perceptions.
All right, so it is true, for a city of its size, Lancaster does have a really low crime rate comparatively, so it is a perception issue. However, in terms of addressing the crimes that do occur, I think the best way to do that is through addressing economic inequality. No one robs a Turkey Hill. I live on Plum Street. The Turkey Hill by my house has been robbed very frequently. Nobody is robbing that store because they have so much money they don't know what to do with it. They're robbing that store because they are desperate. So the part of town I live in has a poverty rate of 41%. That's 12% higher than the city's average. And I think what's important is that we go through, instead of creating a whole new position and spending more tax dollars, why don't we just use the Department of Economic Development and Neighborhood Revitalization, maybe switch the title, Neighborhood Development and Neighborhood Revitalization Economic Development, and instead of employing someone who lives outside of the city who may or may not be out of touch with the city's residents, we hire an actual city resident to do that job so we can navigate more aptly within our communities.
Having grown up in the county in the late 80s, early 90s, I think with regards to county residents' fears, this kind of speaks to me and what I grew up with. The southern part of the county, is very, very conservative, we'll just say, to put it lightly. And I think with regards to a lot of the fears that folks have, I honestly believe that it is racist. In their fears are simply based on racism. And I think that's something we need to combat. I think the city is dedicated to that as a whole. But I think that's one of the areas that really, it's hard to change that perception that those folks have without actually getting them into the city and letting them meet people who are different. And I don't think there's an easy way to do that. I think within the city it's a little different. I think it's certain neighborhoods have a certain idea, where there's areas of drug use, drug dealing and things like that. Those develop sort of a negative stigma. And if you look at crime, violent crime that happens, it's usually in those areas. It's directly related to drug abuse, or drug dealing in particular. And I remember when I was working for the Lancaster City Alliance, I actually had a conversation with a police officer because there was a resident who approached both of us while we were talking and was concerned about recent shootings in the city. And he was very quick to reassure them that every single shooting that had occurred in the past 6 months was drug related. It's not about a bad neighborhood. It's not about the residents of those areas. It's about drugs. And I think that's one of the things we need to start taking on a lot stronger. I think with regards to the perceptions, I think a great deal of it revolves around communication. To change that perception, a strong PR campaign, to point out just facts. And I think that's what we desperately need.
Thank you very much. Joe?
We woke him up.
That's why I have this. Good evening. Social justice and civil rights issues have been recently thrust into the national spotlight more prominently than any time since the 1960s. As specifically as you can, please describe what steps you will take as mayor to hear, engage, and respond to city residents who may be disillusioned by ongoing reports of bitter political partisanship, rising social tensions, and the perceived marginalization of people living in poverty within city limits.
Cindy?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So I think one of the things I'll say is, as mayor, I will do what I've already started to do through campaigning, and that is to visit neighborhoods, knock on doors, attend events, listen to what folks have to say. Sometimes in a room where there's only 4 or 5 people that are in support. I don't really want to minimize this issue because I understand at a level. I understand at a certain level, but I also know that I have not been subjected to the racial biases that exist. And so as mayor, to be able to, first of all, really focus on a diverse workforce within our city that is representative of the folks that they serve, to make sure that we have ample opportunity for community input, because if something happens and everybody goes silent, that's what scares me the most. So to be able to elevate the conversation has to occur. We have to make sure that we call out racism whenever we see it, and I hope I have time for just a quick example. As many of you know, I live in the downtown. I see First Friday. We have police horses. We have engaged officers. I went to the Unity Day and loved it down there, by the way. Such great fun, music, parades, the whole thing. And there were 3 police cruisers that were in a semicircle with all the police officers behind them. That, I know we're kind of cycling back to the first question, but to me it's going to start with our police department, our first responders. We need to make sure that their mindset is such that there is not a discrimination or a perception of discrimination. As mayor, I will be a leader on this issue.
So in terms of addressing social justice and causes, I think that if we're really going to begin seeing a society where everyone is equal and everyone's treated with more respect, we do have to begin with, again, economic inequality, especially when you look at rates of poverty in the city. The rates of poverty differ by race, and about 38.9% of the Latino population lives in poverty compared to, it's around 16% for white individuals, I think it's 16.3%. So for me, recognizing that difference is important in us taking those steps forward towards a more balanced and a more just society. But then going into that, I appreciate how Cindy recognized that she is a white individual in the society, and there is a difference in treatment there through racism, just unacknowledged biases that we may have. You are looking at a whole panel of candidates who are white, and I've taken account of that in this whole race. It's not the most important thing, but I think it is important to recognize. So for me, I do recognize that racism definitely has a factor in our ability to address social justice issues. However, I think if we're going to make the strongest force towards a more equal society, it is through addressing economic inequality.
Zach?
Well, I mean, I think within the LGBTQ community, speaking from my area, I think we experience a lot of racism as well, probably even a heightened rate. I've experienced it, I've seen it just over the years. And I think it's something that we have to very deliberately address. We can't just hint around it. We can't be nuanced about it at all. We have to be very direct, very open about addressing what issues are there. And where we fall short, I think that's absolutely crucial, is taking responsibility for what we've done, what city policy has done in the past. I'm not even talking about recent history, but over the past 50, 100 years, so on. And we need to address that head on. We need to start looking at why poverty is concentrated in certain areas and how we continue that today. I think looking at things like the redlining that occurred in the 60s, the segregation that occurred in the 60s, 70s, and beyond. How does that play into things like gentrification, where we further concentrate poverty by forcing people out of neighborhoods just because of rising rents, rising housing costs? I think it still continues today. And I think if we're going to actually address that, we have to own up to it. And I think, like Tony said, with the income inequality, that's significant. When it comes to jobs, when it comes to racism, even in hiring processes, we need to call that out and own it. I think one of the key things we can do through that, with CRIS funding that exists, just to sort of go into something else, the city does have the option to have stipulations as regards to hiring. I think we need to take full advantage of those options that the city has to further leverage issues like this.
Thank you. Denise?
So as I've been canvassing for the last 9 months or so, since I started this race in January, it is very clear to me that there are people who feel the city doesn't have their back, who don't believe that investment is happening in their neighborhoods. They don't see improvements in their neighborhoods. They see problems. And I have taken upon myself, as I've been canvassing, when I knock on doors, to ask people, how's it going in your neighborhood? What could be more, better, or different? And I think at the heart of the question that you're asking, Joe, is are we able to show that we're taking action and making improvements? And so one of the things that I do when I'm canvassing is, when people tell me about a problem, I come home with a list. And I want people to know whether it's the drug dealers that are in the portico into the basement of a nearby church, or a neighbor that they're having problems with, or an issue that's related to trash, or fill in the blank, that I am responding and following up with those individuals, because I want them to know that I am listening, and I am acting, and I want to make sure that they are seeing that the city, and that me in particular as mayor, is going to take action to make their neighborhoods better. And sometimes it's just a little thing, and sometimes it's a really big thing that's going to take more time and more conversation. But it is also, and I'm just going to echo, the economic inequality we have got to address. If we don't have growth, prosperity, and inclusion for everyone in our city, we are not going to succeed as a regional economy. And that is very, very important to me as well.
Thank you. Brittany?
So, although students under the age of 18 cannot vote, there are other ways for them to become civically engaged. So would boosting civic engagement possibly become a part of your agenda if elected? If so, what approaches would you take so that more students become politically aware, and students on any level?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm very glad that you brought up students, because I have a lot of support from the McCaskey community, and I was recently a McCaskey student not too long ago. So you guys might know there was a debate at McCaskey about a week ago now, and I was not originally invited, nor was Zach, but the students actually reached out to me and said, "Hey Tony, you weren't invited, you better come." So I went, and I thought it was really great. So for me, boosting civic engagement, whether or not you can vote, is important. And I have hypothesized that a way to do this would be to restructure the city's government. If we go to a system where we're electing our city council members by ward, the mayor would become the only at-large council member. They would be voted at-large by the city, and you would have more connected community groups able to decide amongst themselves who will best represent their smaller communities within our large community. And I think this will also help us dismantle the two-party system within our local politics, because you'll be more connected to the person you're voting for as opposed to the party they represent.
Well, I actually love this question, because as a kid, I was a homeschool child, something I haven't shared yet. But one of the nice opportunities for that was I got to go and volunteer. I got to actually go and meet representatives at the state, federal, and local levels. And that was huge growing up to me. The fact that when I was 4 years old was the first time I met a state representative at one of his monthly breakfasts. And he made a point of actually connecting with children there. And I think recognizing that those little things make a big difference. That recognizing that you too can be an elected representative, that you're not just some citizen. You can actually be involved in the process. You have power. You can actively participate. And I think instilling that from a very young age is essential. So I think that's something that I would be very on board with, pushing not just for that. And I know a lot of our city council members are very open and accessible, but I think publicizing that, or maybe making it more regimented, might be the way to go. Of course, they all have full-time jobs. They have other things that keep them away. But I think that that's something that we could work towards. And I think that the majority of city government would be very on board with that.
So this is such a great question, because as a parent of a sixth grader, I can just tell you I get a lot of questions from my daughter's friends, and just wanting to understand how city government works, and and just basic questions about what city government does. I'll also say that my campaign has an intern that is in high school right now, and we have a lot of other students that have gotten involved in the campaign, which has been great. When we went to McCaskey, awesome. One of the things that I'm really interested in doing is the mayor currently meets with Superintendent Rao on a regular basis, and I definitely see that continuing. Okay, we need mics. Yep. Okay, how's that? Okay. So when we're having the debate at McCaskey, the students' questions were so spot on in terms of the issues that our community is facing. And I would really like to continue to have regular conversations with the McCaskey students. Is that okay? Because I feel like, no, it's really loud and it's far away from me. Okay. Oh, you're gonna turn it down, okay.
Now it's too hot, yeah.
We're going from one extreme to the next. Is that better? Okay, better. All right. So just in terms of civic engagement, this is an off-year election, friends, and very few people are coming out to vote. In the primary, 4,000 people voted out of 60,000. Now, I understand that we have a closed primary system, but Democrats outweigh Republicans 3-1 in our community. We have a large independent voter base as well. So these are the kinds of things that we are struggling with. Related to civic engagement, that's going to be a big part of just engagement and transparency in general, and things that I've talked about. I mean, I really commend Tony for making the effort and putting in so much time to make sure city council meetings. He has been the only candidate who has been regularly and dutifully coming to city council, participating, not just videotaping. Those kinds of using technology to ensure that people are engaged is something that I definitely want to continue with.
Yes. Yeah. Clearly, youth are the future of this city. After I retired, the year after I retired, my daughter, who works for the school district of Lancaster, told me how desperately they needed substitute teachers, and you know, even though I was quite amazed that I didn't have a teaching degree, but I could get emergency certified, I spent some time in the classrooms in McCaskey, particularly the high school. And remember one class, they wanted to know, they were asked who the mayor was, and nobody knew, didn't have a clue. So clearly, I think this idea of getting the youth more involved, there's a lot of ways. I'd like to hear from them. Again, I don't want to fall into the trap of I'm the adult dictating what's going to be best for them. I do know at one point in the city and the county, we had the Youth for a Day program, and youth were selected from county high schools, city schools to shadow the different both elected officials and the folks that worked in government. I thought that would be a great idea to get them engaged, but it probably is going to just come down to having opportunities to meet with them, talk with them, hear their concerns. As Denise said, the list of questions that they came up with was really that it reflected the issues that they live with and experience every day. And I think that as we move towards this concept of getting them more engaged earlier on, it is going to take a lot of cooperation with the school district, but I wouldn't also negate churches and other community groups that are engaged with our youth every day.
Claudia.
Most newly elected officials appoint specific cabinet positions but choose to maintain long-standing programs and initiatives. If elected to become Lancaster City's next mayor, what does your first six months in office look like? Could you please name at least one department area you'll seek to either change or create?
Okay, let's use that.
Wow, that's quite the question. It's actually one I've discussed with a few people, quite a bit, obviously. I think one of the key things is each of us is going to take on, whoever ends up as mayor, will take a different approach to things and reorient the government in some way. I don't think that I personally don't have any plans to explicitly replace anyone in particular. I think the idea is that if the government shifts enough, if someone isn't on board, I think that they either need to be wholly committed to the vision of the city or they need to look elsewhere for employment. I think that I do have a short list of folks, advisors, and things like that who have actively continued conversations in their communities in general and very personally as well on solutions that they might have for a lot of the problems that face the city. I think it's important to reiterate the mayor is setting the tone. The mayor's not doing everything. The biggest thing I feel for a mayor is to choose the right people. Like anything else, you're delegating the majority of the work to those who know better. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on everything or even anything. But I think it's absolutely important to choose the right people.
So I had mentioned this before, but I think the director of neighborhood engagement is going to be one of the first things, as well as the search process for a new chief of police, addressing the fire station and the condition of the fire stations will certainly also be at the top of the list. And I think that we also, we're in the process of finishing up engagement with the Federal Environmental Protection Agency related to our stormwater overflows. So that's going to be a major priority and initiative. I think in addition to just, catching up with the business, which I feel really well prepared to do because I've been on city council for the last 4 years and feel that I'm going to be able to step into relationships and the issues and be able to get started on day one is very important. I also think that the diversity in hiring and how we go about hiring, from how we're writing job descriptions, how we are disseminating announcements of job opportunities, how we are engaging staff is also going to be one of the first things that we address because staff turnover is low in the city of Lancaster. And so every job that we hire is an opportunity. And what that brings is a lot of institutional knowledge related. I mean, we have people who work in public works who have told me they never want to work anywhere else. And that's a great thing for the city of Lancaster, but it means that every person that we hire, we have to make sure is excellent, and especially in our police and fire, because that's a $135,000 investment every single year.
Well, I've had the opportunity 3 times. Oh,
Excuse me, just a second. Might we be able to get the people in the next room to turn the music down a little? Could we ask them?
We can try. We're a community center.
Yes, but just down a tad. We're all trying to do the samba and the reggae up here. And Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, Cindy.
No problem.
That's why we gave you guys mics.
So I've had 3 opportunities during the course of my career to step into organizations where there needed to be a transition in leadership. The last being at Family Health Council. I followed a 20-year CEO there. And I think there's a pretty successful formula for the first 6 months. And clearly, the first step is really going to be, I almost think of it as a listening tour. And I've been doing a lot of listening during the campaign, but I haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk with city employees. I haven't had a chance, even though there's certainly been opportunities to knock on doors and go to different functions in the neighborhoods, to have really organized listening tours that go even to a smaller microcosm of what's happening in the neighborhoods. I think, second of all, you have to come in with a clear idea of the culture that you want to create within the city. And I feel strongly that the culture, there needs to be a shift in the culture. We have to start clearly focusing on more transparency, being more inclusive. I want to make sure that there is a greater engagement from within every position in the city, and probably most important to me is the whole customer service. We need to remember as a city who employs us and who pays our salaries. So that listening opportunity in the first 6 months then quickly begins to lead to how you want to identify the right people. We have a chance clearly to hire a police chief. We have an acting fire chief. I think both of those are critical positions that will have to have major recruitments take place. And again, I have also gone on record to say that I will not have a chief of staff in the mayor's office. In fact, I would like to have a neighborhood advocate that would work with me and the people that we serve.
So in the first 6 months of my mayorship, should I be the mayor, I would like to ask all the department heads that I would have, the 3 major departments, and say to them, if you're not willing to move within the boundaries of the city, we are going to begin a search for another head of the department. So, and that's particularly important for me, like I said earlier, economic development and neighborhood revitalization, as well as public works. But then the thing that I think I will be most able to tackle is the transparency part of my platform. Since I've already been committed to live streaming city council meetings, I would like to make what's called a virtual city clerk. It's not a very widely used thing, and even where they have virtual city clerks, they're not fully developed quite yet. What I want to do is look at the laws that we have for what a city clerk constitutes and expand upon those where we can. And basically what I want to do is have the citizens able to access resources and hopefully expand into the ability to sign petitions from home, so that citizens can more effectively petition their government to get more change done that they want, as opposed to waiting for the representatives they have to propose those changes themselves. I think we need to increase our use of technology greatly in the city, because if we don't begin now, we're going to fall behind. The future is technology-based, and we have to be a real leader and driver in that force.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, this question is a variation, I think, on one that Brittany and Claudia have already touched on. Students from elementary school to college are often asked what they want to be when they grow up. It's been said that children can't be what they can't see. How will you staff your administration so that department leaders provide a mirror in which Lancaster City children see opportunities for themselves at the highest levels of city government?
And I'm reminded of something that I was just reading about economic mobility and making sure that zip codes aren't tethering our children into one place and one economic future. And that is something that I think about a lot in terms of how we're going to advance all of the city of Lancaster. And so I'll just say again, this issue of diversity and having a city staff that reflects our community is very, very important to me. And it can't just be one person or even just 5 people, even though I do recognize the importance of having leadership that does reflect the diversity of the city. But it needs to be all the way through our city in every department. And so this is something that, leading by example, the city is going to tackle. How can we do a much, much better job of recruiting diverse candidates? Preference is currently given to city residents. That will certainly continue. But we need to have some benchmarks in terms of diversity and hiring. The other thing is just visibility. I think that one of the things that's just been amazing experience for me in this race is meeting so many people from throughout our city. And that kind of visibility is so important. And having the opportunity to go and visit and meet school district staff and connect with children where they are is going to be something that we as a city need to continue to do. And right now it happens, but it happens primarily through a particular police officer who is visiting those students. And so I'm really interested in how do we use the communities in schools model, like the one that is at Fulton Elementary, where our daughter just graduated from, to advance those community and local government connections.
I think clearly the mayor has to be the role model in this, Joe. I mean, to me, it's really starting with how we can begin to elevate the engagement. So I've already talked about that. I've talked about the position I'd like to create. I had an opportunity early on to visit a first grade class at Ross. It was my granddaughter's, and we explained what the city does, and we asked them to sign up for jobs that they might want to have in the city someday. And I will tell you, police and fire overwhelmingly won. I think in city administration, sorry, Patrick, I think we had 2. That's all that is anything they aspired to, right? So again, to me, it really is, it probably starts with an understanding of folks in the city, their parents, and then the children, of the responsibilities that exist, how they can aspire to those things, and then we need to get the staff out there and engaged at a lot of different levels. And I think if it's made clear that the public shouldn't scare us as a city, that in fact, again, the public is who we want to hear from. We want to embrace their ideas. We want to create forums and opportunities where they can come and talk to us about what they're experiencing, the problems, and more importantly, it's not just forums to hear about your problems, but it's forums to hear what your solutions are. Who better to really have good ideas for how we can jump the hurdles than the people who live it every day, without the filter of, you don't know, you haven't been there, it's not what we do, the budget doesn't allow for it. But I think that's what starts to get people, even young people, energized about how they can have an opportunity to contribute.
Actually, you keep it.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to come up here for that.
Oh,
Sorry, I thought it was you.
Wait, I want that.
I know, right? I know, this harkens back to January.
All right. So for me, making sure that the citizens, the residents feel that their government is effectively representing them, they can see that. It's important that we do have a lot more Latinos in politics and government in general. And it's important that we keep our government very young as well. Not only is our city 40% Latino, but more than 50% of the city is under the age of 30. So it's important that we have young people in government making sure that those jobs are being maintained as well. I think of individuals from the primary like Norman Bristol Colon and Kevin Ressler as great individuals to outreach to the community to be in charge of those key positions, because it's up to them should they want to be a part of that. However, those are the individuals I imagine as doing good in those positions, especially when it comes to economic development and neighborhood revitalization. So, and in addition to that, I think energy is an important factor. I think I have a lot of energy. I'm a very young person. I can't sit still. It's a little agonizing sitting still in a chair for 2 hours. But I plan to be a very present mayor. I plan to be online in the streets. I plan to use all that extra time I have not working at Starbucks and actually being a more active citizen as the mayor.
Well, I think, the core of it, kids, especially younger people, they see everything. They notice people who are like them. They notice people who are different, and usually they don't care. And that's the beautiful part. I think the thing is kids, especially as they're growing up, need to see role models who look like them, who have the background they do, who have the experiences they do, because then it becomes attainable. I think as soon as you put it on a shelf, any position above a certain a certain level, and say that's not for you, I think that's a problem. And I think that's what we come down to a lot of the times. When you look at upper city administration, you see a lot of middle-aged to older white people. And I think that's not because we don't have qualified folks out there of color, of younger people. I think that's just sort of how the administration is formed, and where the priorities are. And I think that's one of the quickest ways to shift up where priorities are and sort of what the public perception of government is. Change that up a little bit and make sure that we're inclusive when it comes to those top positions, even to the more visible positions, and especially in city police and things like that. I think once kids realize they can be that, they'll have a much stronger connection.
Okay.
No, it's not me.
So, the remaining 2 questions for the evening were generated by the NAACP and the League of Women Voters. So, this question we've touched on several times this evening, but it's a very important one. And since Keith Sadler is resigning, if you are elected mayor, what qualities, specific qualities, would you look for in a new police chief? And what specifically would your plan be to diversify the current police department? We've kind of danced around this in a general way. Now we want to focus in and be more specific.
So specifically, I have led several high-profile recruitments, both here in Lancaster City, across the state. First, we have to start with, again, I know you think that as mayor, I'm just going to have all the answers as to what you want to see in your police chief, but those answers reside in you. And so my job as mayor is to work with you to really build that profile. And I think it goes beyond, it's not only characteristics, it certainly has to be background and training. There has to be evidence of commitment to the community engagement that I talked about earlier. Clearly, we have to look at values. We have to look at their experience, background. So a lot of factors are going to go in to our search. I think one of the questions we need to answer early on is, can it be local or must it be national? And I know from talking with Chief Sadler that he feels great pride in the leadership program that he developed when he first came to the city. He believes there are qualified people within the department, and I think that is something we have to be open to and look at. Second of all, I want to make sure that any candidate that's chosen within our process has an opportunity to talk with all of you. So as we approach finalists, and there are certain sectors where in hiring this is done all the time, but it's going to be important to me that any finalist for our police chief position is going to have a chance to be addressed by you. In a forum like this where questions can be posed, they can formulate their responses, and there'll be opportunity for the folks that attend to provide feedback, not necessarily select, but definitely to give their opinion about how they believe each of the candidates performed in a venue like this. This is no different than what they're going to experience on the job every day.
All right, so going back now to whoever has to replace Chief Sadler here. I am looking for someone who is fluent in Spanish. I'm looking for someone who is compassionate when we deal with issues like the opioid crisis and addiction. And I'm looking for someone who is trustworthy as well. I'm looking for someone who will trust me, since I will have to consult with the chief of police very frequently. I'm looking for someone whom I can trust and they can trust me in the calls that we make together. And going into the force now, I am expecting a force that individuals will take up training not only in de-escalation, but also Spanish. Like I said, I want more officers fluent in Spanish. So those are 2 key training aspects I want them to take upon themselves. Then, in addition, we need more city residents being police officers as well, more city representatives, in a sense, being police officers. And I think a way to do that is to have more outreach within the school system itself. I think there's a lot of kids at McCaskey, I should call them young adults really, these young adults who are prepared to serve their communities. You have a great program at McCaskey in terms of getting kids involved in military activities, military careers. I think we need to do a little bit more outreach there and say, hey, you look like a really involved citizen. Oh, you're already fluent in Spanish, or you do this for your community. Maybe we should start training you now, or bringing up the idea now that you could be part of our force one day, serving your city.
I think it was about a couple weeks ago when Chief Sadler announced his retirement. I was one of the newspaper reached out and asked, what my thoughts were on this. So actually a very similarly phrased question. I think the first thing to point out is that Chief Sadler did a great job moving the department forward in many ways. Heading up the Lancaster Pride organization, I interacted with no less than half a dozen officers, lieutenants, and sergeants who headed up our details and security. And the fact that we have gotten compliments every single year from out-of-town visitors on how our police handle themselves, conduct themselves, I think is incredible. These are folks from Reading, from Allentown, who don't see that level of care. And I think that the next police chief would have to expand on that. And I think there's plenty of talent within the current officers within our police department who have those qualities, who I think would be able to move this forward in the right way, and knowing where we've been and knowing where we need to go. I think that's crucial, the context for them, not bringing someone in from the outside who may just have their ideas about where things need to go without understanding the community, without understanding concerns, without understanding how far we've come. I think when it comes to getting things done in the police force, I think we have to be willing to negotiate with the unions to accomplish the goals that we need, that we mean to accomplish. Whether that means making concessions so we can have some more control over what we do, I think we have to keep that as an option. At the end of the day, it's what we're willing to give up to get what we want. In anything like that, with unions, it has to be give and take.
So I just spent 3 hours with Chief Sadler last week. It was supposed to be an hour-long conversation, but if you know the chief, when he starts talking, you're sitting and listening. And I learned a lot about both the path that he has taken internally to develop leadership and to make sure that those leaders are now in serving communities that surround the city, which has been advantageous when we've needed to have intermunicipal cooperation on investigations and so on. I don't have a lot more to add to what's already been said about hiring the next chief of police. Integrity, absolutely essential. Transparency, communication. They need to have connection with city residents and key stakeholders in our community, and part of that connection is obviously their care and concern about moving the city forward. So I don't really have a lot more to add to that. What I do want to talk a little bit about is the 12 to 18 month process that the city undertakes to hire every single one of our police officers. There's a background check that is extensive. They go to the academy. There is months and months of training before they ever get into a patrol car and come onto the streets of Lancaster. It is very time-consuming and process, and one that we are trying to jumpstart and need to do a little bit better to get ahead of the outflow of retiring police officers. And so this is a huge financial investment for our city when we bring on a new officer. And we also, I talked to the chief specifically about the cadet program, which is to recruit candidates from within the city of Lancaster who can come into and get some extra civil service points. And so we have to continue that process because we need more city residents who are officers.
Finally, this week marks a huge celebration in Lancaster with the 2017 Governor's Awards for the Arts in Pennsylvania, with a special recognition for public leadership in the arts presented to the Honorable J. Richard Gray and Mrs. Gail Gray. If you are elected mayor, describe how you see the future of Lancaster City's art scene and how it moves beyond Gallery Row. And we'll start with Tony.
Okay. So I think public art is one of the most important aspects of a community. I think we have a lot of local artists here who are dying to have a chance to display their work. this may sound silly, but there was actually a point in time where I was like, hey, maybe we should have like garbage cans that are sculptures and they're public works of art from citizens. In general, I see this program, the arts program in general, expanding outside into the neighborhoods, giving neighborhoods a little bit more control about what they want to do. I know in the Southwest right now, they have a giant mural project going on. Well, it's actually a mini mural project. But they're putting up murals right now, and they've decided what they want to put up. I think that going forward, we just need to give the communities a lot more freedom and the ability to put art where they want. Maybe even on the garage doors, on using their house as a giant platform for art. I just see public art as a very integral part of the identity of a community, and we really need to keep it up.
Well, I actually live just down from Gallery Row, so I spend a lot of time walking to and from different spots around there. So I see it all. And I think the big thing, like Tony had said, is expanding that out from there. I think, with the public art department that we have established, we're seeing art installations at the train station and elsewhere throughout the city. And I think that's absolutely crucial. The city government does provide services and all that, but there has to be something more that speaks to the spirit of the community, and that has to be community owned and community led. And I think art is one of the things that Lancaster is making its mark on the state and even the world, I think. And that's incredible. I think we need to continue to encourage that in every way we can. I think one of the challenges with that to attract more artists and keep them here does go back to one of the issues that I care most about, is that rent inequalities and things like that. If we can continue to nurture an artist community like that, I know in the past some cities have proposed artist co-ops, things like that. I think we can manage to hold on to budding art talent and then have that help them move the city forward in this area.
So this is such a great question. Because we're celebrating this week and we've gotten so much attention from throughout the state, and we are having one of the biggest celebrations that has happened in the years of history of the Governor's Arts Awards happening here in Lancaster. I was a member as part of City Council. Each council member does a rotation on the Public Arts Advisory Board, and I co-chaired the strategic plan for the city's public art. And we have a few initiatives that are rolling out that are seeking to move away from really expensive fixed sculptures to more engaged community art, where individuals and from our neighborhoods are coming together to tell the story of their neighborhoods, the story of their history of their neighborhood in ways that are using public art. We have a program called Turning Eyesores into Assets. The thing that's in your neighborhood that is just really ugly that you want to make beautiful, we're going to help you do that. We're going to have a temporary art commission where we can engage artists who maybe don't do this full time, but they really want to have a commission, and so we're using private dollars, fundraising now to be able to support those kinds of temporary art installations. I think we have to move beyond commercial art. A resident on Howard Avenue said it to me a few weeks ago. Look, it's not everybody who can walk into a gallery on Gallery Row and buy a $1,000 painting. You're absolutely right. And art is not just commercial art. Art is engagement. Art is connection. Art is a reflection of what our community is. And we are certainly, I'm very ready to move beyond some of the commercial art and what drives that in terms of Gallery Row. We need that. That's one part of the equation, but it's not the only story that Lancaster has to tell.
So as mayor, I think the art initiative, certainly we've seen it blossom over the last decade, and I'm glad it's culminating in the celebration that we're having this week and the recognition of our mayor and his wife. If I look forward 10 years, I guess what would make me happiest is having celebrations that are really focusing in on all of the cultural and historical diversity this city has to offer. It's hard sometimes, I think, for people to get, I know the downtown is truly excited. I loved when we had music in all the quadrants. It is an effort to engage citywide. But the reality is it's very difficult for some people when they're looking at trash and weeds and sidewalks and potholes to get, I'm sure they're looking at the downtown and the art celebration and thinking, what the world is going on? Where's the priorities? So I'm not here to be a downer on this because I think it is a huge, as I said, I'm very happy to be celebrating. But for me, a decade from now, the celebration would be the historical nature of some of our southeast and southwest neighborhoods, really being able to bring a more cultural influence, whether that is music, dance, all of that is the arts, but it's working with neighborhoods, being a facilitator. To me, that is the mayor's greatest role, cheerleader and facilitator of these types of activities, and wanting to hear not only of those things that I'm invested in, but hearing about the things that you want to be invested in and how I can best support that.
So this concludes our panel questions. The candidates will now offer their closing remarks, and they each have 3 minutes. And although our questions couldn't cover every topic, if you are able, we would like to hear some comments about your views on the budget and taxes, the poor air quality in our city, and your views on housing and cleaning up neighborhoods. If you can get it. Joe, yes, it's basically the kitchen sink.
Okay.
And we're going to start with Zach.
All right.
Exactly.
Yay, I get to be the first one.
I know, we've kind of, hit you with this, but these are some key topics that are very important, I think, to the audience, and we didn't really get to address them this evening. So if you can touch on them in 3 minutes.
I'll do what I can. Thanks. I think I'm glad that you brought up things that are actually some of the problems that our city faces. We can talk about successes, and that's great, and we need to. We need to celebrate our successes, but we also have to look at the issues that we actually need to handle and deal with without glossing them over. One of the key things that everyone starts complaining about, all the construction going on Fruitville Pike, on Manor, on Roarstown Road, things like that. And I think those are development projects that exist because city taxes are high. Look at Red Rose Commons, which is city taxed. That's emptying out. Look at a lot of the potential for places to leave Park City. I think we have to be very aware that in the future that is a potential danger of having a tax disparity between the city and surrounding municipalities. So I think there's definitely something to focus on. I don't have all the answers on that. I think one of the things that happens, we need to look at economic development and things like that, and how we do that in order to have a tax base so the burden doesn't fall entirely on homeowners and things like that. And ultimately, I feel it has to be a state level thing. With regards to other issues, air quality, things like that, I think the city's focus on green infrastructure, which I know Deneen knows more about that than I do, is something that I think we continue to work on that. We can need to take some of those ideas and that way of thinking and use that to leverage our city forward. I'm trying to think what was the other key part there?
Housing and cleaning up neighborhoods.
Oh, of course. I think one of the big things, and this is, I think, something everyone here cares deeply about, is focusing on neighborhood revitalization in a positive way. I think we absolutely need to address the fact that our neighborhoods have been neglected, or at least they feel neglected when it comes to the economic development that's occurred in the city. We need to make sure that all economic development is equitable. We have CRIZ funding, which majority of it will affect downtown. Most of those money will go to projects in the city or key corridor areas, and it actually excludes a lot of the neighborhoods. We need to look at different ways we can leverage funding to help those out, whether that's loan funds and things like that, or strengthening LHOP and their programs for home ownership, or just simply addressing the fact that all of our citizens deserve safe, clean housing, and enforcing the codes that are already on the books to ensure that slumlords and absentee landlords aren't simply sucking money out of our communities without giving anything back.
chairing the Finance Committee for the last 4 years, and we're heading into the budget process for 2018 right now, has given me a very up-close and personal look at the challenges that a Class 3 city like Lancaster faces. We have been successful in contrast to many of our sister cities because we've had to make really hard decisions, and our budget has not grown more than 2% year over year, even though we are faced with a pension crisis. And over the last 10 years, our pension costs have increased over 200%. These are some of the challenges. We know what they are. They're not going to go away overnight. We have to have Harrisburg support and to make the kinds of property tax reforms and to have a little bit more freedom to raise revenues outside of property taxes. It just is. And we need everybody's voice at the table to be advocating for those kinds of changes. It's an unjust system. We pay for all of our municipal services, fire and police, which consume 60% of our budget, using property taxes. That leaves not a lot left over for street repairs, which I hear regularly, and I know because I drive around the city too. Hershey Avenue could use a repaving. These are the kinds of challenges that the next mayor is going to face no matter what. But I think that there's also an opportunity for us to be thinking about how we are utilizing, for example, the CRIS dollars. That is money that would normally go to the state that can stay here locally. Until recently, that funding has largely been used to support larger projects in the city, and I am bound and determined to make sure that the CRIS is working to support businesses throughout our community and smaller businesses. And so there's a task force that's working on that right now. They will be making recommendations before the end of the year, and we will be working to get those dollars out to support small businesses throughout our city. And I am particularly interested in those that are south of King Street and that are truly represent the entrepreneurial spirit of what Lancaster is. We have a lot of small businesses that I think could benefit from this, who want to grow and expand and do not have the capital to be able to do so. We want to help them in that journey. Wow, housing. Okay, so tomorrow night, I'll put in a plug. The Lancaster Housing Opportunities Partnership is going to be having another debate. The focus will be entirely on housing, and I urge you to come out and join us at Tech Centro. And I didn't get to all of the topics in that, but I thank you so much for coming.
And I'm probably not going to get to them all either. I'm glad you put in a plug for the housing forum tomorrow. So when you hear the list from Jenny about the issues that are facing the city, and that's a point in time list. I mean, tomorrow there could be more things, different things. When you elect your mayor, what you really, I believe, are going to need to evaluate is who has the experience to face not only what exists now, but what is to come. You need to make sure that you are going to choose as your mayor someone who has led large organizations through the problem solving. And most importantly, I think for me, is that you would choose a mayor that knows how much they're going to care about their people, because that overcomes the problems. I am a strong believer in the fact that people really don't care about how much you know till they know how much you care. And in my experience, both in the organizations that I've been a part of, in my campaign, and when I'm mayor, people are what matter to me most. And to be able to create opportunities so that good ideas can come from any direction. On the small things, we've talked about them, weeds, trash, and potholes, and the big things that Jenny has mentioned, safety, economic development, housing. The important thing is I am going to listen, engage, and I will not judge your ideas based on your circumstances or your address. I just think that is so important for everyone to hear. At the end of the day, everybody in this city wants to lead a dignified life. They wake up in the morning and they care about their families and they want peace and they want happiness and they want equality. And I want to work with you to determine how best we can achieve that for Lancaster City. So again, I will echo for everybody that how much we appreciate you being here tonight, because to make an informed choice, you have to hear from your candidates, and you've taken a fair amount of time out of today anyway to be able to do that. So thank you all so much.
Okay, Tony?
Okay, so jumping right into air. I think that we need to work to develop a more efficient and more reliable public transit system, give those who don't live in the best financial conditions more access to transport to get to work. Studies show that it improves the economy overall, and that's something I will strive to do because it's also a sustainable goal. That air quality we were talking about, less people driving cars is always good for the environment. And then, going into housing. So I firmly believe that we need to educate our young people right out of high school into more trade jobs, help increase the flow of contractors or plumbers or electricians to decrease the overall cost of a single maintenance at one's home. That is an investment. Using property taxes as a resource, you will get that return later when you do need to get that housework done. So then also community groups to take care of the neighborhood at large and how it looks outside. In the last year of her life, my great-grandmother, I took care of her, and it was really hard to see her literally wither away in front of me. And I firmly believe that we need to be individuals in the community, because she was a real neighborhood figure, and when she was gone, people knew it. She inspires me every day. But I can't get too emotional because we're going into the budget. All right, so there's a few aspects here. I disagree with the notion of giving people a 2% discount on paying their taxes early because that helps those with bigger estates and not those with smaller properties, those who are in that financial state of struggle. I know I myself, I got about $2,000 of school tax to pay because I do in fact own my home. Parking violations. I don't think that we should be giving people $25 fines for not having their vehicle parked on street cleaning day. We need to educate them why we clean the streets. First offense would be watching a video on why we clean the streets. Second offense would be picking up the streets. I promise you that will be more effective in having people move on parking day. And then the last thing about the budget, it's an event that has driven me to run for office in that we gave the Marriott massive tax breaks last year. City Council approved it and I was vehemently opposed. Art Morris himself educated me on the subject and I trust his wisdom very much. I think it's important that going forward we make better deals that don't cater to big business, deals that cater to our individuals in the community. So, lastly in my 30 seconds, I'm going to leave you with some onlys. I'm the only lifelong resident of Lancaster up here. I'm the only graduate of McCaskey up here. I'm the only one of these candidates who lives outside of the northwest part of town. The last 5 mayors have come from the northwest, where we see a lot of financial wealth. And then, lastly, yo puedo hablar español y yo soy el solo candidato que puede hablar español. And I think that's important for who's representing the city. And I gotta stop. I love you all. Power to the people.